Good morning. We're in Ayin Beis, reviewing the conclusion of it. And we are at the bottom of page 1387. Summing up what we learned, what we're learning. He's calling this now the Hamshacha Yeseda Be'elam Habriya. The new paragraph at the bottom of the page in 1387 that Talmud, remember, is located in Bria, with Mishnah, Yetzirah, and Mikra, and Asiya. Their root is the other way around. Mikra is the highest place, is the highest level in Chabad of Atzilus, and therefore goes down into Asiya, and all that you can really reveal from it is its outer expression, the Asiya, the stories, the actual actionable mitzvahs. Mishnah and Yetzirah, as we learned, is rooted in Chagas of Atzilus. Talmud is rooted in Nihi, but it's the Chabad of Nihi. So Talmud comes down into the darkness where there's lack of clarity that Mishnah and Mikra have, and as the Talmudic sages in the world of the Choshech of Bria, Bara Choshech, Machshakem Heshivani, the darkness where Talmud Bavli enters, but through questions and discussion and debate and arguments, they're able to derive and come to a deeper Hamshach Yeseda. Something deeper comes out of it. In the last paragraph, we learned with many different scenarios where he gave the examples of why, in order to reach to a deeper place, you have to go down further down, and the other way around as well. The higher the place, the more further down it goes. Both in the Halah and the Hamshacha, there's a connection between that which is at the lower levels and that which is on the higher levels. It's actually similar to the concept of Mikra, but there it's the other way around. Mikra there, because it's such a high level, all we can get is the Asiya of it. Here, it's the other way around, that you're getting to the root of the Mikra in the Chochma Tima and the Ayin of Keser. You're doing that precisely because you're explaining it down on a lower level, as we learned, as I said, the last two pages. Similar to the Ohr Halavana, that the moon doesn't have light of its own. So in other words, it doesn't have the clarity like the sun does, like the Mashpia does, like Mikra and Mishnah do. On the other hand, the moon is what illuminates the night. So it receives from the sun, but it's able to illuminate the light. It's its own air, the Koyach Atzmei, as we learned. And as a result, it goes into the root. And he gave the different examples of Krishma, Yichud of Abba Ve'imo, Dafke and Bria. You have to go out of Atzilus in order to access those higher levels. And the concept of Aspaklayash Ena Me'ira, that Dafke, an unclear glass, or what he calls what is similar to a mirror, which is only a reflection, but you can see higher levels, even though you only see the external dimension of them. These are just some of the examples he gave. But like he said, so both the halah, to go to a higher level, you have to go down. And the same thing, it has to come from a higher level. So now, and then the final example he gave was with Eina Rechlecha Be'elam Haza, spoke about the four different expressions. Eina Rechlecha, Ein Zulasecha, Efes Biltecha. So he said that Efes Biltecha, Yemesa Mashiach, is Efes, a deeper level, because Yemesa Mashiach means it's coming down lower. Eina Rechlecha, I'm sorry, Ein Zulasecha is only Gan Eden, but even more so, Eina Rechlecha Be'elam Haza, that the Koyach Atzmus, in order to create this existence, is Koyach Atzmus is dafka in this world. And in order to create this world, you have to have the Koyach Atzmus. That's till the new paragraph. And then he said, Inyan Hamshacha, this Hamshacha Yeseda Be'elam Abriya, which in the bigger context here is, when we access something deeper by going into a darker place, in this case, into Bria, Talmud Be'Bria, which is Machshakim, a darker place, meaning there's no clarity. Because in the time of the Mishnah, they had clarity, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says, Yesh Leimer, that this is the Gilia of the Ayin Aleki, which is the Elam Habriya. And what we learned was, let's sum up what we learned, that Atzilus is considered a world of Elokus. So it's a world of bittul. Where's the Yesh begin? When I say Yesh, an independent consciousness, an independent identity, that's in Bria. So he calls it Yesh Harishan Shenivra Ma'ayin Eliki. So being that is the first level that's coming from the ayin of Atzilus, so he says, so therefore, Meir Sham Gili Ha'ayin. So Bria is closer to Atzilus, obviously, than Yitzira. So he says, where does this ayin that creates the Yesh of Bria originate from? Keser. As we discussed, that ayin is a relative term. Every level that's compared to a higher level where there's a paradigm shift is an ayin. So the ayin of Keser Ani Rishon is connected to Ani Achron, to the ayin of Malchus Natzilus is rooted in the ayin of Keser, which we called before the Keser, the crown, Atorah. I remember we access the Atorah Dafka when we go down below, Se'ena or Re'ena. So he said, that's Ani Rishon Ani Achron, which Ani is the letters ayin. L'chein Dafka, B'chinas HaMalchus, that's why Dafka Malchus is what creates Yesh Ma'ayin, the Bria, of Bria. Chochma does not have this power. Chochma is not a creator. Chochma is the original kernel seed that will be planted into, so to speak, Malchus, ultimately, in Bina and then in Malchus. But Malchus, not Schilosin B'Seifon, the beginning is wedged in the end. So, therefore, where do you have the Gilead Ayin Aliki? Is a Gilead, which is a high level of Keser? That is Dafka Malchus, which creates Bria, the first Yesh. But how do you access that? That's accessed when you're doing the work in Bria. At the end of the day, you have to still reveal it, but it has that power. So here you see the same idea that the highest levels are embedded in the lower levels, but then you have to work at it. You have to work on revealing it. And in the context of Talmud, that's the struggle, the exertion that when the Talmudic sages work hard in trying to understand something that's not clear in the Mishnah, then they're able to access this higher level of the ayin of Keser, which is embedded in the ayin of Malchus, which in turn animates and energizes and creates the Yesh of Bria. Now I was going to explain this in more detail, but that's where we're up to right now. So to just sum it up in simple terms is a concept that we've learned in many, many places, very familiar concept, that when you go into darkness, even though initially darkness is lower than light, you would think that that's on the ostensible level, but when you're able to reveal light in a darker place, it means you're reaching a higher level of light. And for a higher level of light, a higher level of light to come, and in order to come down to a lower level, you need to access that higher level of light. And that is essentially what Talmud does. But the theme really is a broader one because it affects everything. Our avodah, all different applications that he gave here. I just want to make one point before we continue. That concept of finding the deepest levels of godliness in the darkest places, we learned earlier, before we got to Torah Ohr, on page 1350 in Ayin Beis, we learned it when we spoke about Tefillah Momata L'mayla. But there, he wasn't talking about it in the context of Torah and Kedusha. There he said, actually, he was talking about real distress, like the concept of tshuva. When a person, like you don't see here that he's talking here, the concept of tshuva, like when a person transgresses, so his crimes, and even deliberate crimes, are transformed into merits. He didn't give that example here, even though it would seem to be that's the best example of all. It's so dark, and when you do tshuva there, you're accessing the highest levels. Because here he's still talking about Torah Mamay Lamata. In the Mamay Lamata of Torah, in the Gili Torah Ohr, Talmud has something that Mishnah and Mikra does not have. It's able to reach deeper. But at the end of the day, he's not talking here the distress, what we talked about, Min HaMeitzar, the pain, the trauma, the darkness of Golus. None of that you see here. Here he's talking all within the Stalshus of Kedusha. You find that where is a higher Gilead revealed, like the Ayin of Keser is revealed in Bria, like we're learning now. So it's just important to distinguish that in darkness itself, there's also levels. This is still a darkness within the world of Torah within the Mamay Lamata itself, there are levels that ultimately they all will come together because we want to be able to transform our entire lives. In a way, you could say he's not talking about pain here. He's not talking about pain and suffering. Here he's talking about the darkness of lack of clarity in a world that's dark, and to how to find the clarity of Torah Ohr, the light of Torah and the Torah Semes in a world where we don't see that clarity. So the concept is similar, that when you have to illuminate the dark place, you need to reach a higher level. But it's a different type of higher. There, the higher level goes all the way into the power of Helam Atzmi, Koyach Atzmus. Even here, Koyach Atzmus, he's talking about Koyach Atzmus of creation, not the Koyach Atzmus that is within the darkness of the darkest, that you find the ultimate levels of the core essence. Just wanted to qualify this, and it's important. We will talk about this more, and when we sum up the entire picture. But it's just a contrast between the Mamata Lamayla darkness and the Mamayla Lamata darkness, so to speak. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Obviously, these are two different tracks of trying to reach the highest levels. One is for a Torah scholar, let's say, versus an Amaretz, which goes with the Ein Od and with the distress you're just talking about. Now, from these two tracks, are they reaching the same level, or one can be reached deeper than the other? When
Each one has something.
Atmi.
Each one has something the other doesn't have. It's like Tzaddik and Baal Tshuva.
Correct.
If you go back, I referred to it a few days ago, to much earlier, where he spoke about Mashiach, Osala Sovet Tzaddikai B'tiyufta, and I can tell you the pages about, if you want, where it talks that Mashiach will bring tzaddikim to do tshuva. He discusses this very point, where there's a quality in the Mamay Lamata because it's more pure elikus. It's a more revealed state of the divine. When you're learning Talmud and you're finding godliness and the truth and emes, very different than when you find it in distress or pain. So as far as pure Gili elikus, like so-called Giluyim, the Mamay Lamata has a quality. We also learned that in volume 2, that's the quality why you need to have Mamay Lamata, because you want to have it on God's terms. On the other hand, if you're talking about a deeper atzmizdik, a deeper core essential connection, obviously distress, because it's such a dark place, has something that the tzaddik doesn't have. That's what a Baal Tshuva has. Only a Baal Tshuva went through such distress, and tzaddik did not. But yet, a tzaddik will receive that quality from the Baal Tshuva and through Mashiach. A Baal Tshuva accesses their very lives. It's like saying the difference between someone who's lived a beautiful, blessed life and someone who's lived a very difficult life. So they both, and we're talking about both coming to appreciate, both coming to experience high levels of godliness. Each one has something the other doesn't have, and they complement each other and they feed each other. So that's the end of it. At the end of the day, yes, there's only one God, but God has many dimensions, the godliness. And each one of these two, that's why you need both tracks, because each one brings out and expresses another dimension. It's like we learned earlier the difference between Koyach HaGilui, the power of God to express and reveal, Koyach HaHelam, the power of God to conceal. So though both of them have an overlap, because in both of them there's concealment, but obviously in a real distressing, painful situation, there's far more concealment. Whereas in Torah, at the end of the day, it's not quite that same level. But you see here the overlap. It's not just that Torah is light and Helam is only in the world of the Baal Tshuva or only in the world of Mamat Lamayla. You see there's an overlap in both of them, which is ultimately a way of joining the two. So every one of us in life is going to go through some form of Helam, some form of, I don't want to use the word distress, but some challenge, some loss, pain. At the same time, all of us are also blessed with grace, with inspiration, with gifts. You know, God gives us life. He gives us health. We all have blessings. And you really want to permeate godliness in every part of our lives. So ultimately, when they come together, you have it on all angles, whether it's covering the darkest of the dark or the brightest of the bright, And everyone needs both the mamay lamata, mamat lamayla, with mamay lamata being more of a, so to speak, in the interface on God's terms, mamat lamayla more integrated on our terms. But each one again overlaps with the other, so they're interconnected. That's a short aspect of it. As I said, I am going to talk about this a lot more when we finish this part of Ayin Beis, and after we sum up all the connections to the Maimorim we've learned, Mika Hashem Elokeinu, and get the answers to the questions that the Rebbe Rashab did not answer. Then I'm going to go back to this. I very much intend to focus at least a number of classes on the joining of the Mamat Lamayla, Mamayla Lamato. But still, it's worthwhile mentioning it, obviously, as we learn it, so we understand it. But I'm going to talk about this a lot more, because it really connects to the bigger themes of Ayin Beis that go back all the way earlier, which, as I said, I want to do it in an organized way. So I continue to allude to it, or more than allude, even mention it and describe it a bit. But the real elaboration I will do when we have all the pieces in place.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, it's a central theme in every part of our lives. You know, Anila Doidi we're an L. Who initiates, God or us? And you'll always see in Judaism both aspects. You know, come Shabbos. Shabbos is a day that was given to us from above. On the other hand, we have to do something. We have to light candles. We have to make Hiddush. We daven. The malachas, the things we don't supposed to do with it. So there's always a relationship between getting a gift from above and our making an effort. The question is where the emphasis is. Yom Tov, for example, is sometimes called, Yom Tov compared to Shabbos is called Mekadesh Yisrael, Mekadesh Hazmanim. The Jews are the ones that are Mekadesh the Chodesh, the new month, and that designates what day in the month will be the holiday. Today, I know it's already calculated, but in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you need witnesses to witness the new moon. Shabbos is not like that. There's no witnesses. The seventh day of the week, Friday night, it's Mekacha B'kaima. That's the expression. God sanctified it. Yom Tov is Mekachinu Yisrael Iyu Kachinu Lizmanim. So that's another example, and you'll find everywhere in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism and Torah, combination. Is it us? Is it God? Sometimes God initiates, sometimes we initiate, but there's always going to be a joining of the two. There's never just exclusively one without the other. And the question again is the extent, how much is coming from Susa Dilatata, from within us, from generated by us, how much from above. The difference in this and Tishrei we spoke about, not in this class, in other class I spoke about. Tishrei is El Mamata Lamayla, Nisan is Mamay Lamata, because Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. But that doesn't mean there was no effort from the people below. So this you'll find a central theme. Nowhere in Judaism, you're not going to find this aspect of the partnership, so to speak. Matan Torah. Hashem comes down the mountain, Moshe goes up. So yes, Matan Torah is primarily matana, but it's not exclusively that. We also receive the Torah, Kabbalah Torah. So it's something you can really apply across the board. It could also answer a lot of questions when you think about it. But it's never going to be a black and white thing where this is completely Mamay Lamata, this is completely Mamat Lamayla. There's always a combination. Who blesses us in Parnasa? It says, Barach Hashem Elokecha. God blesses us. Birchas Hashem Hitashir. It's God's blessing that makes you wealthy. But then it said, Barach Hashem Elokecha B'chol HaShatasa. In everything you do. That doesn't mean you can just stay in bed and asleep and God will just send you gifts. He says, make a keli for it. And even making the keli, you could also say, God gave me the strength to make the keli. So you're always going to have this dance of your work, God's response. God's inspiring you, and then your response. And back and forth and back and forth. And remember, in the central theme of the interface between God and existence, which is the theme of Ayin Beis, it makes total sense. Because you want to join them together. It's like in a marriage. In a marriage, who's the initiator? Even though you say the man is the mashpia, the woman is the makabel is not just a passive state. Each of them are giving something to the other, and it's not always so clear. You know, whether it's anila deidi v'deidi li or v'deidi li and anilai, and it's often one or the other, and it's a constant mix of the two, with without any so-called, as I said, stark black and white rules, because you need both, and for it to be a student and a teacher. So you think the teacher is the initiator, not necessarily. The student can be the one that elicits questions. The student's hunger or thirst can also draw from the teacher. It's a back and forth give and take. Even if one is primarily a mashpia and the makal, but the talmidei yesh mekulam, the student gives something back to the teacher doesn't have on his own. And on the other hand, that itself comes from the depths of the teacher. So you just have to realize that it's really the symbiotic give and take relationship of everything in existence. You know, when you say, for example, the bees pollinate the flowers. So are the bees giving to the flowers, or the flowers to the bees? The bees are getting the nectar. They're feeding off of it. But in turn, they pollinate. They carry the seed from one flower to the next. All of nature is like that. The human body, you'll find this constantly. There's the give and take. Now, sometimes there's more focus on the giving, sometimes on the taking. And sometimes it's a combination of both, and it's a constant balance, which is really a very eloquent dance of Rotze and Shuv in a way. Los Mashpia Makabel, Mashpia, Makabel, the sun, the moon, and many other themes that we're discussing here, just to broaden the context of it all. Okay. Now, with that said, let's continue. 3 lines from the bottom of page 1387. Pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. Aleph Shin Pei Zayin says by Inyan Hu. This is an Inyan to explain the Amshachi Yisera, that we find something deeper in the lower level. Even though on the revealed level, obviously, Atzilus is higher than Bria. But there's something that is revealed in Bria that you don't see in Atzilus, which actually also reveals it in Atzilus as well, as we'll soon see. Va'inyan hu. So after saying that Ayin Aliki is a Gilim Adrei Gavoy and Nailef all the way from Keser, he says, Va'inyan hu, the Inyan of this is Kamashkasam or Kamacha. We learn elsewhere, David Omar Shvachim B'dvarim Pshutim. David HaMelech in Tehillim, in the book of Psalms, you'll see when he praises God, he very often uses very simple examples of praising God. Doesn't talk necessarily about sublime and high-level, ethereal levels. Kamoi Zehayam Godel, like this great sea. All these analogies that you are greater than the greatest sea. You're more powerful than the thunder. Orachav Yadayim, Harim Hagvayim Liyalim. Your arms are expansive. The Harim Hagvayim is using examples of high mountains. The Yalim. Yalim are, Yal is a ram? Morabu Masech Hashem. So he uses examples of this world. Metaphors or real physical examples to describe God's greatness. Now you'd think you want to describe God's greatness, you talk about very profound levels, God's power of infinite power. And yet he's used Dvarim Pshutim. The Eina Maskin Yonim Gdelim B'Madregas Atzilus. You don't see him mention, he doesn't mention any of the higher levels and the levels of Atzilus. And there's so why? This is due to the fact Shebisavas Biyah, then the creation of Biyah, the Yesh HaNivra, in the Nivroim, the mountains, the sea, the sun, the moon, I mean, all the different physical examples he gives. Yesh b'zeh koyach havaflos ein sof, yesher mebehasavas atzilus. Next page, 1388. There's something in the creation of existence. Even though you can't compare the lofty levels of Atzilus and the higher spheres, nevertheless, there's something in creating Biyah that describes the magnitude, if you wish. The word I want to use is the awesome, the majesty. The power and aflaw usually means wonder. You use the word wonder too. Something wondrous when you see creation that even more than the creation of Atzilus. And he's going to explain why. The Bisavas Atzilus, Hisav is not creation. Hisav means bringing into being, because Atzilus is not really a nivra. Atzilus is more of an emanation. So he says, so in the bringing into being, the emanation of Atzilus, who b'chinas gilei hahelam, there it's a revealing that which is concealed. Like when we say, does God have wisdom? So we know God is not defined by wisdom, but he has wisdom. So Chochma of Atzilus reveals the wisdom within the divine. You don't see a chiddush. It's gilei hahelam. It's revealing. Like I gave the example of let's say a teacher. A teacher is revealing his wisdom to a student. Okay, that's a big thing. And the student now appreciates it, people appreciate it. But let's say suddenly you see the teacher do something that you never imagined that he would be capable of doing. Suddenly the teacher, let's say, stands up and draws a beautiful painting. That's more than, even though technically it's also gilei hahelam, but it's not his usual so-called expression. He's something she'enei hischachus. It's not hischachus. It's a revelation. You want to know God's power? Look in Atzilus. Aval hisav is biyah, but in the creation of biyah, hu b'chinas hischachus. Because creating a yesh is not like the ayin. If you express something that's similar to who you are, that's a revelation of who you are, which is a nice thing. But you don't see a chiddush. If you express something that doesn't seem to be your natural state, that means you have something within you that is not just a flow. Like I mentioned, yesh mi yesh means you take a reservoir of water or a fountain of water and you draw water from it. That's what the fountain is about. But the fountain was either buried under the ground, a well, let's say a wellspring, and now you're drawing out from it. But then if you suddenly find something that's not water, you realize it's a bigger hafla, it's a bigger wonder, because it's not like similar to its source. Yesh and ayin are like that. Gilei hahelam is not like that. Gilei hahelam means you're revealing that which was there, but we didn't see it before. Chiddush is something that no one would have imagined that from this place would come something like that. So the very creation of existence has that element that Atzilus does not have. Chiddush. If you're talking about the revelations of the divine revealing, Atzilus is a higher state of revealing. But if you're talking about hafla, wonder, awe, you see, wow. When you say that the Nevroim, Yechelim Leida Ye can know that more, because they're experiencing something that does not seem would come from Hashem. Hashem, to create a yesh is a leap, is a paradigm shift. But Atzmus the Ein Sof. So they know more of the wonder, the majesty, the magnitude, the I don't know if that's the right word. Looking for the different words. And they see the power of Atzmus. So interestingly, when you reveal something that is so-called more reflective of yourself, as I say, it's an achievement. But when you reveal something that doesn't seem commensurate to you, you're actually doing something a lot greater. Like I mentioned, a teacher that can teach little children profound ideas on their level, of course, in a way is revealing a deeper dimension of himself than someone who's teaching people on his own level. Just as examples. Ukamoy Kain is going back to explain what so David HaMelech be'inyan su modem einechem v'ru'u mibore. So the pasuk says, lift your eyes to heaven, v'ru'u mibore, and see who created all of this. So what is the deeper meaning of this? So generally it means study creation, analyze creation, and you'll see, and you'll be enamored, you'll be impacted, you'll see who created it all. But he's specifically focusing on Bora. The bezen nida koyach ha'ensa b'muchash. So when you look at creation, even though on one hand it doesn't reveal godliness on its own, you need to contemplate it. Atzilus is a gilui. If you are not now in the world of Atzilus, you cannot deny that it's an expression of the divine. This world, there's a concealment. That itself tells you about the depth of the Creator. Because that he can create a world where his power is concealed. But look what he created. Look at the beauty of this world. Something that is not reflective of himself. That is a far greater haflaw, wonder. Now, the qualification here that it doesn't have the same level of quality. Because remember, it's not muhus, it's mitzias. You're seeing the existence of it. So he goes on to say, V'ima yesh the kol zeh, hu b'nevroim b'b'chinis yediyas ha-mitzias. Remember we learned before about Spaklari she'ena me'ira, Spaklari ha-me'ira. It's not like Moshe seeing the very personality of godliness. It's all this is the nevroim in a form of yediyas mitzias. We become aware of the existence of this type of power, that God could create something like a yesh. By contrast, the revelation Atzilus is a mahus thing. It's like you're experiencing firsthand the very personality of godliness. Going back to what he said earlier, nevertheless, though you're seeing not the very personality, but what you're seeing is of higher levels of God's power than Atzilus. So in Atzilus, you see lower levels of God's power, but you see the very level itself. Whereas here, you're seeing in this world, you're seeing through the Yesh, you're seeing higher levels, but you're only seeing the existence of it. Doesn't mean you can relate to it. Like, someone says to you, tell me, how does God create Yesh Ma'ayin? How does he create something that's so unlike any type of divine revelation? Can you replicate it? And the answer is no. It's the mysteries of God's creation. So you don't really know the mohus of it, but you can't deny the fact is that it was created by the Creator. So even though the creation or the creations, the creatures, don't see the very mohus, the mahu, the personality of Ein Sof, shebezeh, I should say, shebezeh, within it. Nevertheless, they're aware of, and they comprehend, and they sense, they feel this Keich Ein Sof. Now you could say, what about people who look at the whole world and they don't find godliness? That's not what he's discussing. We're talking about someone looks at, let's say, the sea, the ocean, and just sees the power of the waves, the relentless power. So in Sefer Akedas Yitzchak, that's cited in Chassidus, it says, from the Loyush Beisu, from the so-called unceasing, unwavering nature of existence that never stops. The sun rises every morning and the moon in the evening. This type of consistency. We learn about the Koyach Ein Sof, the infinite power of God. In Atzilus, you won't see that. In Atzilus, you'll see God's wisdom, God's understanding, revelations. Here, there's an element of what we said before, haflaw, and it's not just knowing it exists. Like he says, there's a yediyah, there's asaga, and there's argosha. We are aware, we understand, and we feel. It's still not riyas hamahus. It's not like you see and understand the very power as if you relate to it. I remember reading once, I forgot who it was it Einstein? One of the scientists, when he discovered certain thing in the cosmos, and he said like for days, he just stood outside gazing at the stars and was in awe, just in awe of the beauty, the complexity, the design. That's a sense like that. So at the same time, if I recall correctly, he writes, not that we understand it, but we're in awe of it. Now, of course, afterwards, you try to quantify, you try to understand the rules and laws of nature. But there's an element that remains mysterious. Like, why is it this way and not that way? And all kinds of different things that remain. It's not like you relate it as if it's yours. It's not like you're mohus, like someone you know. Its mystique is part of its power. So it has both elements. You see it, but it's not the mohus. That's called mitzias. Now he says there's awareness and there's understanding and a feeling of hargosha. You do sense it. and specifically the creations, the creatures of the world of Bria, shehem masigim mamish. So especially, so this would be even the Nevroim and Asiyah see this. When we look at the world, Sumar Menechem, we raise our eyes, we can experience this. But especially the creations that exist in Bria, like the Malachim and others that are the souls that are in Bria, so they specifically have this experience. Shehem masigim mamish. They mamish understand, but masigim, hasaga. Like we said, chacham, not like a navi, but like a chacham, like intelligence. The imeilah mekanna b'kursaya. Because the supernal mother, which is Bina of Atzilus, where's it nest? In Bria, Kursaya, in the throne, the world of the throne. So Ima is Hasaga. It's not Chochma. Chochma nests in Atzilus. Because Chochma is what we learned earlier, that absolute clarity, like you're seeing it as you're seeing it with your own eyes, something that in a way you can relate to its very Mahus, its personality. In Bina, you're a step away from that. And with that nests in Bria, so there's Asaga. However, it's still Mitzias relative to the Mahus of Atzilus. Let me stop if there are any questions. No questions? Everything clear? Okay. Let's continue. The Inyan Shen is bar le'il. Now, he's going to address another point. Recall earlier, he said, when he said, V'chochma techayas ba'aleha, ba'aleha being Bina reveals all these deeper dimensions. And a chochma is only like a kernel, a seed, which is similar to what we're learning here. That in Bria, it reveals a whole, when you say reveals, it's a chiddush, but it reveals a whole dimension of godliness you would not see in Atzilus. But then, if you recall, he also said that Chochma has it all concentrated within it. In other words, it's not skipping Chochma. It's not from Keser to Malchus to Bria, it's traveling through Chochma. However, Chochma, it's in a concealed state. This we learn more at length here on top of page 1384. So he's going to say, he wants to now bring that into the picture and say, how does that play itself in this? Because remember, Talmud, as much as it reveals these deeper dimensions that you don't see in the Mishnah on its own, Talmud is based on Mishnah. Talmud is not just accessing the source on its own. It's going through Mishnah and Mikra. However, it's struggling to understand it, and that process, it's revealing deeper levels. So he's now going to address, so what's the role of Chochma in this? So he says, the Iyashen is baril il. And the idea we discussed earlier, Shemizgala b'chinas hahelam shebachachma, that in this process, it's revealing that which is concealed within Chochma. So in the Mishnah, when you look at it, the people who are the scholars of the Mishnah, the sages, the Mishnah sages, they understand it. But someone that doesn't have that clarity doesn't. So he says like this now. It's by them, it's concealed. So he says like this. That this inyan that we talked about, that reveals that which is concealed within Chochma, Yesh Shleimer, we can say, Kamoi came by Gili de Elam Abriya. We could say similar idea is also in the world of Bria that we're discussing here. That what? That ekulam b'chochma sisa. Remember the beginning of the paragraph, he said, there's the Gili ha'ayin alaki. They're going to say like this, because everything was created with chochma. Kulam b'chochma sisa. Everything you crafted, you built, you created with wisdom, with chochma. Shayisavasi mebchinas chochma. The creation comes from Chochma. This design, this majesty, this what I was saying earlier, the awe and wonder that we discover in Bria, in this world, who created that? It was created with the wisdom of Chochma. But Chochma ain't bekoch lahavas yesh ma'an kanal. But on the other hand, we know that Chochma, like we said before, does not create. It doesn't have the power to create Ma'ayin the Yesh. That's Dafka Malchus. In a physical example, as high as the heaven is, heaven does not give birth to vegetation. If you want to have Teitze Eretz Desha, the vegetation, you have to go into the earth, which is example for Malchus. On the other hand, who created the earth? Hashem, with his wisdom. So how do you balance that? It's not really a question he's asking. He's coming to explain that you really need both. So Chochma doesn't have the power to create Yesh Ma'ayin, yet the Yesh was created with the wisdom of Chochma. So you see here a combination of God's wisdom, but God's power to create. Chochma is not the power to create. Chochma is the power of how to create. Once God says, I want to use my creative energy, so now I'm using Chochma to create the design, the plan, the eloquence and poetry of existence. It's like an author of a book. First, you need the power, I want to write a book. Then you need to make a plan. And you need to use wisdom. So even though wisdom itself can't write a book, but once you have that so-called decision that you've made, I'm going to create, now wisdom comes into play and tells you how to do it. It's like the what and the how. So he says like this, Chochma doesn't have the power to create. And yet, everything was created with Chochma. So the dynamics of it is, here's how it works. The ayin of the creation, meaning Yesh Ma'ayin, comes from Keser that's higher than Chochma. That's the power of God to create from ayin to Yesh, from one paradigm to another, which is a chiddush, not just Gilia Helam. We're not just talking about revealing something that was there. Similar to when we give birth to a child, or when the earth produces flowers or vegetation or trees and fruits and so on. So when you look at the earth, you wouldn't think it could produce all of that. When you look at a human being, we can create, reshape things, yesh miyesh. It's only give the birth to a child, there's a chiddush here. So he says that power to go from ayin to yesh, which comes from keser, he says that's melubish in Chochma. So it doesn't bypass Chochma. Chochma is not just so-called an outside designer that you hire and say, hey, I want to build a house, tell me how to do it. That very power of creation travels through Chochma. So in a sense, like you're empowering the wisdom of Chochma with the power of creation now, which is higher than Chochma, but it's behel b'shari b'atzilis ein amer gili b'chinas ayin. Because in Atzilus, that level of ayin does not radiate. What you see there is Chochma, Bina, Das. You see the structure of Atzilus. That level of creation has not yet manifested because Atzilus is not a creation. Atzilus is a revelation. But the power of creation has now been implanted within Atzilus, in Chochma. So Sad Begilui, Ukanal, the B'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof, Efshel is Galus Batzilus. Like we said earlier, the Atzmus of Ein Sof cannot be revealed in Atzilus. The Shamu B'chinas Riyas HaMahus Mamish. That's why Moshe could only see the back of Hashem, not the front, because in Atzilus everything's Mahus. Atzmus is too high for experiencing the Mahus of it. Atzmus can be experienced through the Mitzias, but the Mahus is just too intense. So Atzmus cannot be revealed in Atzilus where there's the Mahus. What then is revealed in Chochma? In Chochma is revealed that it is Reisha Ishtalsus, the beginning of the process. That, yes. So Atzilus is telling you about the process of how creation comes into being. But you don't yet have the creation itself of Bria. But the ayin, which is concealed and manifest within Chochma, he b'chinas Helen b'Chochma. That's Helen. So if you look at the Chochma of Atzilus, you see a revelation. It's a kernel, it's a seed, but there's a revelation. The ayin, which it's carrying within, has not been revealed. It's like we talked about the seed that comes from the father. In the seed, you will not see the creation of a child. Does it have the power? Yes, it has the power to fertilize an egg, and then, which the woman is Malchus, and she'll ultimately give birth to a child, which will be Bria. So the power of creation has been given to a Chochma of Atzilus and Atzilus. But the implementation of Bria is still concealed until it creates. And then this ayin of Keser, the power to create, which has been embedded and clothed within Chochma, travels through Malchus, and there the power to create. So Mahus we don't have, but we see the reality of it. We see a world. In Atzilus, you don't see the physical world yet. And here you see it, Nida, it emerges, becomes discernible, Vanigla, and revealed in Yediyas HaMetzias, at least, that you know the existence. Here, a child was born. So if you want to use that example, it's a good example. Parents have the potential to give birth. The father provides the seed, the mother provides, the egg. But then you need the power of creation. That's why we see, without the third partner, Hashem, not necessarily they'll conceive. Not automatic. So you need a koyach abriya, koyach yesh ma'ayin. Now when that, but it's embedded in it's not just a koyach yesh ma'ayin out of nowhere. It's through the seed and the egg that's fertilized, and then the mother carrying the malchus that gives birth to a child. So where do you see the chiddush of bria? In the child. Though in Atzilus, it's already concealed, like in the case of the mother and father, Abba v'Ima. So they reveal that deeper power. In them alone, you'll see many strengths. Human beings, parents have other qualities, but the power to create a new child, that's only through this process. And then there's that the wonder and the awe and the afla of a birth. And this is what it means, that it reveals that which was concealed within Chochma. Now, the next piece I'd rather reserve for tomorrow's class because it's a little more in depth. He's going to say, Sheira She'inyan, the root of this is Atzmus and Ohr. Here we're talking Atzilus and Bria. But he's going to take us back all the way to Atzmus, how Atzmus creates. And he's going to say that Ohr is the way God creates. He uses Ohr, that's his so-called stylus, if you will. It's his paintbrush. That's the energy he uses to create. But the power of creation could only come from Atzmus itself, which is similar in this case. Ohr would be like Chochma, and Bria would be like the Yesh, and Atzmus is revealed after the creator. The creation comes from Atzmus, but it's through the Ayin that manifests through Ohr, which is the next section. I just want to spend more time explaining it. That's why I'd rather explain it to you in the next class. I'll stop here. But that's the next piece that he's going to speak about. And all that is going to explain, going back to Talmud, what it means with Talmud would be, so Talmud reveals deeper things like a birthing that you don't see in the Mishnah on its own. So even though they, on that level, are able to see clarity, but there's something the Talmud adds, like we learned earlier, the halachas that the Talmud develops are even deeper than that which was there in Mishnah and even Mikra, he said, because it's accessing the ayin of Keser. So that explains the process of what we do when we learn Torah. We're not just revealing the concealed, we're also being machadish, innovating, but based on of course, the rules and the basis is the text, obviously, of the Pasuk and of the Mishnah. Okay, we'll stop here. I'll stop for any questions. I'll stop the class right now. Any questions, comments, anything? Very powerful stuff here. Okay. So we're a few lines before the end of the paragraph, middle of page 1388. And we'll stop here. Good. We'll stop the recording.